Julian, good morning, brother. How are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you doing?
Doing fantastic, man. I know you did a little bit of martial arts back in your day. I'd love to hear about it, but just got done with Muay Thai myself. Ran
Oh,
over this way, took a shower, and
that's
here we
me.
are.
Yeah.
Um, so Julian, I love people like you because you've seemingly lived more than one life, and the different things that you've done are like hard to piece together.
Yeah.
I got here written down that you worked at Raytheon. I heard you say, this is your words, that you discovered J Lo and you were dang near a pro or semi-pro kickboxer. So, like, piece this all together for me, brother. Take me back to the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got here.
Yeah, wow. That when you put it like that in those three different extremes, that's kind of hilarious. But yeah, so growing up in LA, I grew up in East LA, Culver City, Venice Beach. That was my stomping ground. So
Is that a nice area or like middle of the road? I know LA's
no, it was
all
middle.
sorts
It
of
was
different.
middle to lower class. I was in a space where I'm African American mixed. I'm mixed with that plus Filipino, Hawaiian,
Okay.
and Irish. And but I grew up. All my family is African American. But growing up when I was a kid, I had big curly hair, very light skin. It was kind of tough growing up around all African American and then looking like this high yellow that they called you at the time. So I used to get my butt kicked every day, jumped,
Uh,
I mean, beat up to almost like to the point where needing like medical attention kind of thing. So
mm,
it got really difficult for me. So there was a situation in my life where I actually, my father was an alcoholic. I went to live with him and he did something pretty outrageous. He pulled a gun on me because I ditched school,
mm,
threatened to kill me. And that was kind of like a turning point for me. It's one of those, everybody has those transition moments where they just go, okay, this a turning point. I can go this way or go that way. And that's when I said, you know what, I'm just going to disassociate myself with this dysfunctional family and kind of find an alternative ego that will help me survive. And so I went
mm.
and started taking kickboxing. It wasn't kickboxing. There was this gym in LA off Olympic down near downtown. It was a boxing gym. So I took the bus down there on the way home from school and I just started, well, I just walked in and the guy was like, let me see what you got, and yeah, I was scared to death, but I ended up going a lot, and that became my outlet. It
Mm.
paid off really well, but my weight class and my height, I wasn't able to like become a boxer. Just I was going to fight people 6'1", 6'2", and I'm about the size of Tyson in height, but I didn't have his girth. You know what I mean? So it was one of those things where I could not actually compete in that. But I actually always had an affinity towards martial arts because I did take martial arts as a kid. So I ended up finding a guy that actually knew Muay Thai, and I ended up studying Muay Thai as a kid.
Mm.
But I loved it because it was more of a religion with that group of people. It really was like a family. Even though you're beating on each other, you still had this affinity towards respect.
Mhm.
And I just fell in love with the sport. And I didn't tell my family. I just disassociated. I left home. I was on the street. I lived in the streets. I used to walk through. I remember people asked me, "How did you survive?" I walked through hotels and I would see those, maid carts, and I would take their shampoos and towels and just keep walking. They had that free food buffets. I act like I worked there or I was a patron there, and I would just walk in, say good morning, and go right to the buffet and start eating. And I lived in my car at night, and then I went to the gym where I had a part-time job and showered in the mornings and stuff like that. But
So you just left home. You said
oh, dude, I was in
associate.
the
I
street.
thought more mental, but you actually were just, "Hey, I'm done with you all."
I was done. I just disassociated myself with the whole family, and I just became like literally just like a nomad, basically. But no
Mm.
one knew it. I went to school, and then when I got my first apartment, I was the king of the school all of a sudden because I was the teenager who lied about my
Mhm.
age and I had my own apartment. It was a single. It was like this one bedroom, but a hot plate and a little refrigerator and a bathroom. But it was mine, So and then all of a sudden I became the cool kid on the block. But that was how I got into boxing and kickboxing. Now, full full fledged. My cousin's a rapper and he became famous. I got a record deal in Hollywood and everybody's trying to be famous in LA, but
Mm.
the false pretense is there are wolves out there trying to tell you you can be famous so they can get something from you.
Mhm.
And that's what happened to me. And this guy that pretty much got me a record deal with Capitol Records, went to the studio, did magazines. In those days, we didn't have, Instagrams or anything. We had Soul Teen magazine, Right On magazine, Jet magazine, and that was our social media at those days. So I was in those magazines. I got all this fan mail. Dude, it
I
was
I
wild.
I gotta stop you. What was your rapper name?
Oh, dude, I wasn't a rapper, I was a singer, and
Oh,
I have never told anybody, and I Yeah,
Come on, this is a
it was
world
it was
first right here.
it was Fine, Fine with a hyphen over the E.
Okay.
But I look like El DeBarge, if you know what El DeBarge looked like. I was an El DeBarge type look, or Angelo, or it was really like high yellow, big hair,
R&B singer, kinda
Yeah,
like
yeah,
sexy guy. Yeah,
yeah,
much
yeah, yeah. It was
yeah.
like a Prince.
Does martial arts too, like, this guy's
Right.
got some
Yeah,
swag.
it was all about my body. I had pictures where I had no shirt on and I was it was stupid, man. It was
Sick.
hilarious.
No, this is awesome.
But dude, I got fan mail from all over the country, Polaroid pictures. I don't know if you know what those are, but girls would send me letters and Polaroids begging me to marry them and how much they're in love with me and stuff like that. But the manager, introduced me to Michael Jackson. I mean, I was in the studio,
Whoa.
met all these people because he was trying to woo me, and just I wasn't into that. I wasn't willing to like go that route. I didn't care to have a record deal that bad. So
Mhm.
I told him never mind. And
That probably was a pretty serious financial incentive if that was to work out, right? Or
yeah,
were you a
they
little
do.
skeptical at the time that, "Hey, like, come on."
Yeah, it was. You would think it would be like an escape, something I would want, but I had what you call kind of a conscience about it. I just didn't have any desire to. I'd rather be broke than to give up my soul for maybe. I know so many people that did have one hit wonders who are now working at Starbucks, basically. I mean, they're
Mm.
not. They might have made it for a minute, but they're right back to where they started because it doesn't. You can't sustain it unless you have the right mindset, and
Like,
so.
you kinda thought what they were trying to do with you, the image, the look, all that, you're like, "This isn't really me."
Yeah, yeah, it
So
wasn't just that, but they wanted to do things to me physically in their own interest that I just wasn't willing to go down.
what do you mean by that?
Sexuality. It was just they were just
Oh,
trying to, do something. I wasn't willing. I'm like, sorry, that's not my interest. And it was really graphic. I can get really graphic. And the book I'm writing is pretty graphic. And so but I just said no, I don't need this. I don't need this entertainment industry. And so he said, well, I can get me another pretty boy anywhere. I don't need you. And I was like, okay, well, I quit.
uh,
And I kind of just walked away. And then
well, that's always been the kinda I live nowhere near Hollywood,
yeah,
LA. We're in
yeah.
Columbus, Ohio, we're like 2,000 miles away, but that's always been the sort of underground story then, and if you wanna get ahead in Hollywood, these young
Yeah,
starlets, they gotta do
yeah,
whatever producers, but it sounds like
yeah.
that's not just like an undercurrent, that's maybe like
Oh, it's full circle. I can tell you,
paying
I
you.
became a talent agent, and after I got out of the industry, I ended up becoming a talent agent only because I was known in the industry. That was one way I was known because I already was known as a dancer and singer and all that kind of stuff. But then my cousin became famous. He became a famous rapper, and then his name is Tone Loc, and he had a song called
Oh, yeah, hell
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Cool, man.
he became, pretty famous. So people associated me with him. And, it turned out that that put some doors open for me. So a industry agency that was a dance agency and talent agency hired me as a talent agent. And so I became a talent agent. And so that was weird because no one's really trained to be a talent agent. You just do it, because you're people
Right.
and you get to go to clubs and find great dancers and say, "Would you want to be in a video?" I became that manager now, but and it was like the guy that I ran away from. I became in some ways
Mm,
because I had the power to say, "Do you want to be in a video or be on tour with Prince?"
right.
And so you would see people literally willing to lose their souls just so they can have the opportunity to dance on video with Prince and stuff. And for a minute, I got kind of wrapped up in that egocentric state. And but there was a part where I just couldn't do it. I said, I wanted to quit this, and it was really a friend, a girl that I had a crush on that I was telling her, I'm just feeling, I don't like my feeling. I don't like what I'm feeling. And she's like, I have a friend that has a boxing gym. You should go take a boxing class. You used to fight, just maybe get some energy out. You haven't worked out in a while. I'm like, you know what? That's a good idea. So I went to the gym to take a boxing class. And at the same time as where I met J Lo, and when I didn't discover her, her manager discovered her. But when she auditioned for Living Color, they didn't want to hire her because she was a little thick and not as slim as some of the dancers. But I saw something in her because I was always looking for dancers, and I said her energy, her persona when she's dancing, she captures the stage, and everyone else becomes a blur. And I
Mm,
said, let's do a tester. And so we did a test, and we found out that everybody in the audience picked her as a person they couldn't take their eyes off of. And so that's
mm.
why she was able to get signed on to Living Color, is one of the things that got her signed on there. So, but at first they didn't want to sign her. And I just make it a tester, do 3 dance routines and ask the audience who they not take their eyes off of, and she was the one. And so I kind of put her on that, and that was a launching pad for Jennifer Lopez, basically. And so that was one of those things. But so that answers two of those questions. But the other question is, I took the class. Mike Weaver, who was an ex heavyweight champion, never showed up to class. He was the guy who was supposed to teach,
Ah,
and I ended up teaching the class, and I ended up loving teaching the class. And so I ended up kind of slowly exiting the talent. I wouldn't show up to the office. I didn't go to clubs as much. I started working out, stopped partying as much. I started focusing on that, and I changed my name. My legal name is not Julian. It's my middle name in Hawaiian. It means jewel of the family. So Julian became my AKA. So everyone in fitness knew me as Julian, and everyone in the industry knew me as Freddie or Free. And then I kind of reinvented myself and started my own business in fitness. And I ended up getting back in entertainment, but on the fitness side.
mm,
And I moved to Malibu and started training like Sylvester Stallone and Craig Nelson in Hollywood, Malibu. Had a great time, but then I got older and got into corporate through some other weird circumstance. But and that's how that all happened. So that answers those things. So I got into corporate through after getting married. I decided to get out of the fitness industry because I had to leave LA because I wanted to have a better life for my kids. We had two kids, and I'm like, LA is kind of crazy, man. For me at the time, it just I couldn't separate the Hollywood scene and the fitness scene, which is still part of Hollywood and still just as dysfunctional as any other industry. And got into corporate, and that's when my life made a major turn.
so what was driving you to get out of the talent agency business? Because it sounds like not only did people know you, you were having success.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was lucrative. I'm sure if you would have kept going down that path, it could have been.
yeah,
But I would think being in that position, people would kill for that, just sort of like your record deal. It
yeah.
was just not for you the way the business had to be done.
It there's to be honest with you, I can't tell you what it was except for the egocentric state of the entertainment industry. It focuses
Mm,
on the ego and the desire to want to be liked so much that it really has
mm,
nothing to do with talent, has nothing to do with business. It has everything to do with control and domination and power.
mm,
And just after so many things I've been through as a kid and all the dysfunction as growing up, that was a trigger for me. I didn't like feeling like I was overpowered. I didn't like feeling like I was the villain. I didn't want to be a
mhm.
villain. And to actually be successful in that industry, either you or somebody you work with is going to be a villain, and you're going to be associated with them. And it was hard for me to accept that, and so I just didn't I didn't have a clear conscience in it. And all the stories you hear right now, they're all true in a lot of ways. I mean, yeah, I can't tell you how many things I've seen that are just almost movie centric. You think there was a movie scene being played out, and no one would really do that unless they were being paid to do it. But it really is kind of true to form. I mean, the things you hear. I just I just decided to get out of it. And so always people ask me that question: How wouldn't you want to go back? I'm like, no, I have no miss. I don't miss the entertainment industry on that level. I
Why
miss,
do you think the industry's like that? Because you're involved in real estate, I'm involved in e-commerce, we've
yeah,
been involved in construction.
yeah.
Doesn't seem like those industries are in this weird predator prey,
You're right.
one
You're right.
person of extreme power, one person of no power kind of
Yeah.
relationships. Why do you think that emerged?
I think there's a lot of things that have nothing to do with business that really run the business. Everything's about perception. So
Mm,
in corporations, you have a business model that really takes precedent over perception. If the perception is I'm a nice guy, but we have documentation to show that you're not, that you're being you're discriminating against somebody. So in the entertainment industry, it's just the opposite. Perception trumps everything. So
mm. It's
and
like
so I
this
think
ethereal thing, like, "He's
right.
talented." Well, what does
Yeah.
that mean, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. And so everything's about putting a perception out there, not perspective. And so that becomes the narrative. So everything is about how do I make things look? And so it looks like a business, but it really isn't. It's just a bunch of egomaniacs who are out for control, trying to get what they can. Now that's on R&B music. I can't say on the countryside or different genres. Hollywood on the acting side, I can't even say it's for sure that way. But I just know that for the music side that I was in, it had little to do with talent, had more to do with control, and I just had to get out of it. So
I
and that's a good point to bring up too. There's different circles in every industry and every business, and so the circle that I was in was just pretty interesting and pretty aggressive in that way. So I just wanted to get out of it.
Well, I would hope that it's become more democratized, right? If I'm a great R&B singer, I can just put my stuff out on YouTube. I can
Yeah,
put it out on SoundCloud. Like, I don't need Capitol Records to give me
yeah,
a record deal
100%.
anymore. There's this really funny conversation between if you're in the hip hop world, J. Cole and I think it was Lil Pump. They had like a beef going on, and then
Yeah,
J. Cole invited him to his house, and they did
mhm,
like a 2 hour interview. It was crazy. This was like before podcasts were even
yeah,
like really that big. This was probably
mm,
maybe 10 years ago.
mhm,
And J. Cole asked Lil Pump, like, how many songs did you make before you had like a song like that was a hit?
mm,
And Lil Pump, not a very articulate fella, but he goes like, I had one song I made like with my friends, and then
yeah,
I made this song.
yeah.
And J. Cole's like,
Like,
what?
yeah, I
He's
saw
like, he's
that.
like, dude, he's like, I was making music like in my house for 15 years.
Yeah,
J. Cole's mind is just like blown. You can tell he's like pissed. He's like, this
yeah.
is bullshit.
That's true.
Uh,
I mean, now you don't need a talent agent. You don't need a AR representation. You don't need anything. It's really the world has shifted so much, and that's what I talk about in corporate now. I'm trying to get legacy companies to know you can't
mm,
just be so great, down into your own belief system anymore because it's changed so fast and so rapidly. Your competitor is going to kill you literally within a year time if you don't catch up. There's sales companies right now that are still dialing for dollars or not really focusing on how to
mm,
leverage the opportunities. And it's amazing how slow corporations are moving towards the way things are running. And it's almost like the way that when computers first came out, people like who would want a computer in their home? There's so many, companies were like in Blockbuster, who would want to watch TV? They want to come get their movies. Like, Netflix just says, okay, I'll see you later.
mhm.
It's weird how, it's just, we get set in our ways and we don't really think about how to adapt. And I think my focus has always been to adapt and to make sure that I come out unscathed as much as possible. That's a downfall and a positive at the same time.
Mm. Well, the classic business case for that is Kodak, right? They're like,
Yeah.
who's gonna want digital photography? Kodak
Right.
was like one of the
Yeah.
couple biggest companies in the world,
Yeah.
and
100.
apparently a bunch of people brought them like, "Hey, we have this like digital technology. Do you have
Yeah.
any interest?" And they
Yeah.
just went, "No. Like, why would we do that? This film business is so profitable for us. Like, why
Yeah.
would we get into this weird digital thing?" And
Yep, 100%. It's
boy,
amazing.
boy, were they wrong. Um,
100%. So I
okay,
I I love that. So thanks for sharing.
so you move out of LA to
Yep.
give the family a more,
Well,
let's
no, I
say.
didn't. Let me back up. I didn't move out yet. I quit the fitness business and got into sales, and I became the worst thing ever. And no offense to people that do it, but for me, coming from the entertainment and fitness industry, I went into life insurance sales because the people that knew me that I was talking to, they were out of the R&B sector and now into the Anglo-Saxon business sector. They wore khakis to mow their lawn. They were completely different personalities than I've ever associated with.
Mhm.
And but I wanted to find what it was like to be in that world because I was told that I need to get a real job, even though I was making about $1 million a year. I was needing to do something different because I didn't have a 401k. That was the crazy thing. I remember the guy said, "You need a 401k," and I was like, "Well, what's that?" So I was like, "I don't know what that is." He's like, "You need to now that you're married and you have kids, you want to get some investments and blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Okay." And then I was audited by the IRS. And I'm like, "Okay, there's something here. I got to figure out what this is." So I started looking at insurance, and then I met my mother married a man who was a top producer in insurance. My uncle was the most successful African American insurance agent in the country, and so they kind of prime me and say, "Well, why don't you look into insurance? You're getting audited anyway. You need to learn this stuff." So I became a life agent, and that's when I lost all my Hollywood friends because in training they make you call all your
Oh,
friends.
yeah. Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm calling Lenny Kravitz, "Hey man, you need to get life insurance." Like, click. So it was like, who am I? All of a sudden, I went from sweats and tank tops to wearing suits and driving around talking about life insurance. That's when I got suicidal and I was off the cliff. I
Mm.
was about to kill myself because I literally didn't know who I was anymore. Never really did, to be honest with you. And then that was when I just started getting did very well with it because I met Jim Rohn by default. He was, because he was my family and certain people that I associate with were very successful. I had a
Mm.
doorway to him. And he took an interest in me. I don't know why to this day. Actually, the guy that started Jim Rohn is a friend of mine here in Dallas, and I'm part of his inner circle. And he remembers the conversation. He goes, "I remember you. I remember him talking to Julian, talking to you on the phone." And so it was kind of funny because he walked me off a ledge one time when I was literally about to just lose it.
Mm.
And he literally stopped his conversation, it became like a father figure I never had, and just kind of honed in on what I was saying and listened and said, he really told me, Julian, I want you to really think about how feelings shift with a song. And it resonated with me because I was always into music. He goes,
Mhm.
you can listen to a sad song because you're sad, and you'll listen to a happy song because you're happy. Right now you're sad, so you're going to be listening to that sad song. But he goes, the sad song is going to end, and you got to know there's a different song coming. And I was like, that was like the most powerful thing a person that I didn't know say to me, because I can
Mhm.
understand it from the music perspective. And I kind of built myself psychology and what I teach now around that. And so, and he walked me off the ledge, and but it helped me, and he gave me some books to read. He told me about some things that a lot of people don't know that he shared with me, and that I've shared a few times. But I became a top producer after having some time with him. And then people started asking me, how did I become so successful? Like, I sold my first big client was an advertisement agency, and everyone was trying to get that agency. And they're like, how did you get it? And I said, well, I had just had elevator talk with a guy. I just became a friend and not try to sell myself. And that's how I ended up over time. He worked with me, and that became a presentation. And that put me in a space where I ended up teaching other divisions. And then I ended up speaking at a school, and there was a guy named from Raytheon there that was speaking about Raytheon. And he liked what I said because I was infusing some of this Jim Rohn stuff, and no one was ever doing that. They just let Jim Rohn do it, but I was doing it in
Mm.
my own words from a street version. And he said, "Hey, I want you to kind of work with Raytheon. Would you be a consultant for us?" And we have a consulting division. We send people out to consult with companies we work with. And I ended up working with Raytheon, and so that became my focus. So I answered all your questions there. So I kind of had to get to that Raytheon part. So that's what happened.
It's funny you say that, Julian, because I think that every person who gets into business, they have to take like 1 or 4, like, intro things, which is either A, you do some network marketing,
Hmm.
B, you do what you did, like life insurance,
Yeah.
finance, and sales. But for me, I was very close to doing life insurance right after I
Oh,
graduated.
really?
I had, a job offer from Northwestern Mutual, and I was, like, that close to taking it, but did not.
Whew.
You gotta start either like a construction company or do some
Yeah.
door sales or something like that, or like calling lawn care or something like that.
Right.
Or start a small business like a power washing business or
Yeah.
something like that. Those are like the handful of different businesses that I see so many people like, "Yeah, I got into this," and that kind of propelled me to the next thing. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
sounds like it was not only, an intro to business for you, but a really successful one nonetheless.
Well, it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about the talent, the skill I already had, which is what I did. Was I was quickly. I'm really quick to adapt and become observant to my environment. And going back to my childhood, when I walked the streets, I became like this. It's like Terminator. They look through the eyes of a Terminator. They're assessing weight and height and distance, and that was me. I would see the whole picture. I would look back and see everything versus just seeing what my emotions saw. I became very aware. And so I was able to adapt really quickly. True story, when I was younger, maybe about 19, I already had my apartment. I was doing my own thing. Sony Pictures in Culver City. This was before 9/11, of course. So Sony Pictures is in Culver City off of Overland Boulevard. And there was a guard gate and a gate that opened and closed like this. I mean, and the parking lot was right next to the guard gate. So you would drive in, and then you would just walk past the guards. I just drove in, parked my little Fiat X19 and just walked right past the guards like I belonged there. Say, "Hey, good morning, guys," and just kept walking. And because I acted like I belonged there, they never asked me who I was. So I used to just walk on the lot and play around in the movie lots and stuff. I was able to walk up to that movie lot, and go into the gym and tell them they needed me to be their boxing coach there. And
Mm.
they hired me, and I have the contract today. I just found it because I was going through the garage, and I found an old contract from Sony Pictures to be the fitness coach at their Sony Pictures movie lot. But that became part of my nature. I never second guess what I could do, and that became my PowerPoint. And I think a lot of people in sales or what they're trying to do, they always have that little second voice in their head, kind of like, well, you might get embarrassed, or something might happen, or it might not work. And that one little voice changes that energy that other people pick up, and it is what stops the momentum. And so I just learned to kind of act through as if, and that became my power muscle when I was doing sales, and it never stopped me. I was able to walk in the doors and talk to executives, even though they were 6'5", all white. I didn't go in there and say, "Well, I'm not white." I didn't. I just talked to them like a person, and I think that helped me become a salesperson, even when I'm consulting. I've always never had a problem getting a business. I've never had to market myself. I was like, I just just I reach out to the guy and say, "This is what I want to do," and they're like, "Oh, well, how do you do that?" And I tell them, and that's it. But it's also a downfall, and I'll share that later when we get to that part. But it's definitely a downfall of that as well.
Well, I've heard you talk about kind of our ancestral programming and the
Hmm.
reasons why we do certain things, and I think what you're really hitting on there is that fear of rejection, sort of.
Yeah,
"Hey, Julian, I'd like to have you on the podcast." You go, "Nah, like, it's not for me." And we go, "Ugh," like, it hurts, like, to the point that you're so nervous, you just don't even wanna ask.
right, right.
And it sounds like you just went like, "Well, if they tell me no, get out of here, kid. No, you can't be our boxing coach." It's like, "All right, well, I'm back where I started. I
Yeah.
don't know people. I'm never probably gonna see them again."
Yeah.
And
It
it's
it's it's
difficult
go
to get
it's
over that.
go back to the boxing ring. If you're doing Muay Thai, so, the first time you ever did it, I remember it like it was yesterday. When I went to that gym, the guy says, "Let me see what you can do." He called a guy that was the evilest looking brother I've ever seen at that moment, that he had to hit me, and he's like, "Get in the ring with him." And I use the same water, but I fuse my water just like you do.
Oh, yep, yep.
Yeah, yeah,
Got the ion bottle.
yeah, I am, but I have the same thing. But, the feeling of that fear of what might happen was so powerful for the moments before I got hit. Once I got hit, the shock of getting hit was there, and it's like, "Oh my god, he just hit me," and I'm trying to protect myself. But there all of a sudden a switch comes on, and you start becoming instinctively alpha. You start protecting yourself before getting hit, and before you know it, you're not even thinking about it. It's just your certain muscles and certain mechanics of your body kicks in, and that's your subconscious. And so I became very aware of my subconscious at a young age versus
Mm.
becoming so focused on my conscious. Most of us live by our conscience, never really understanding how our subconscious runs everything. And so we just expose what our subconscious is feeling through our conscious, but our subconscious is what's generating our perception of things. And so, because of that, I started focusing on my subconscious and knowing that my subconscious would normally feel this way. I choose not to let it do that. And then that is when it changed. And so, I think that going back to the boxing, I remember I knocked him out in the third round with one punch.
Dang.
After, and the coach that I had, he looked at me, he goes, "I was waiting for you to wake up." It's like, "When well, I just thought you were gonna be a heavy bag for a while," because I was thinking so much for the first 2 rounds about what the hell is happening. "Oh, my dad's this, my mom's that, no one loves me." I was like, "Oh, man, I'm getting my ass kicked. I shouldn't have walked in here," and all these things were going through my head, and I was at those reasons for what I was thinking, I was still getting my ass kicked. Nothing was changing. So it was really that part of my life that I go back to every time I do something. It's like, "Yeah, I'm just getting in the ring. It's just it's going to feel funny for a minute, but it'll shift, and that's what
I'm
it did."
I'm sure there's still gyms out there like that, but that sounds like some old school, like,
Oh yeah, they
name,
wouldn't do it now in our society. That would
get him
be
in and beat him up, and
yeah, they'll be
yeah,
sued. They'll be sued
it's
now.
like, "Hey, I want these guys to sign up, like, let's kick their ass," you know?
Yeah.
They're like, "God, that sucked. I don't ever wanna do that again."
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I actually spoke to the college here. There's a conversation every year for the coaches of football for high school and college here in Dallas. They meet once a year, sessions, and it's a 4-day session, I believe. And the number one thing they talked to me about was teenage depression. They have more people
Mm.
that are depressed than ever before. And what do? I can't coach them. As soon as I yell at them, they want to sue me. You know?
Mm.
And it's because coaches are used to kind of coming at you about what you need to do, like, push the narrative. And it's challenging because our definition of trial has shifted. What we see as a struggle today, or what we see as even discrimination today, is different than it was just 40 years ago or 30 years ago. So it's the whole gamut has shifted, the whole paradigm has shifted. And that's why I said people don't have perspective, they have perception. And so entertainment industry, government, media, especially entertainment, for sure. I know behind the scenes better than most. It's all about perception, and they
Mhm.
know that our society lives by perception. So they use that to their advantage, and not enough people really step back and go, "Why are they saying this over and over? Why this jingle saying this?" If you listen to jingles, anything you hear over and over a period of time becomes truth to the subconscious, and so that's why we have jingles. That's why we have narratives that are completely repeated over and over. That's why they
Slogans.
yeah,
Yeah,
slogans. It's to make you believe it, even though it's not true. If
yeah.
there's a slogan out there saying, the moon doesn't exist, over time, in less than 5 years, you would have a massive belief system that the moon doesn't exist, and
Mhm.
that's how it starts. We're really programmable and very easily if we're not aware.
Well, this is something that there's like this a funny rule that as conversations go on longer and longer,
Mhm.
eventually Hitler and Nazis become embedded in them somewhere. I'd have to find what it's called. But I was gonna say that was one of the things that the Nazis did. They just kept saying like this propaganda over and over and over again.
Yeah.
They knew if we repeat this often enough, people will believe it. And
Yeah.
that's a psychological trick that people play, and
Yeah.
hey, how many good slogans are out there that you're like, "Oh, that's a great slogan." I don't know if it's true or not, but you're
Yeah.
like, "I remember it, and that's what I
Yeah.
remember about this interaction."
Right. Right. 100%.
One thing I was gonna go back to and say, because you were talking about when you were boxing, kinda just letting your subconscious take over. There's this great book that I recently read called The Inner Game of Tennis. There's also an
Mm.
Inner Game of Golf. He might
Okay.
have a series of these, but that's exactly what he says. He's like, "Stop trying to, like, think, like, okay, hold my racket this way." And in a fight, you're like, "Okay, keep my hands up. Okay, throw my 1, throw my 2. Okay, here's my kick. I'm gonna throw this combo." He's
Yeah.
stop trying to, like, have the forefront of your mind make the decisions. He's like,
Yeah.
"Let what happens, happens." And he's like, "And then just observe what happens.
Mhm.
Get it out of balance, don't get mad at yourself, like, that wasn't a good thing or a bad thing, it was just what happened.
Right.
Observe it and try to become an observer of what's going on." And
Yeah.
he has this philosophy that your body sort of, like, knows what to do innately. Like, you can watch someone do it and then go, "Okay, I kind of understand," and I can repeat it. But when we get in our head and we start, like, trying to, like, tell ourselves so many pieces of information, "Okay, roll the racket over. Okay, hold it, not too big of a backswing. Okay, get your feet set." Then you kinda, like, get in the way. You
Yeah.
almost jam that up, and I think that's what athletes talk about, like, "I'm in flow." It's like, "Hey, I'm just letting my body do the work."
Yeah, it's the flow state 100%. That's why I have this thing called No So 24, and then we do it 3 days a month. So 1 day a week and 3 days a month. I go with no social media, nothing.
Mm.
I don't even have radio, TV. Um, I don't look at my emails, anything. And I think people forget how busy the mind is and how much stuff is coming at you. And we live in a society where we're not used to having silence. And so to do that really preps my brain to be completely aware of the newness of the noise when I start up again. So if like on Sundays, I don't even look at my phones or nothing. And then on Monday, it's almost like if you ate healthy for 7 days, like nothing but like true organic fruits and vegetables, let's say, and then you put a cupcake in your mouth, you won't taste the cupcake anymore. All of a sudden, you taste the chemicals
Mhm.
in the cupcake because you can actually your body's like, whoa, what was that, and it's something that's foreign for that period of time, and that's what happens. So I hear more on the Monday, and I hear the subliminal or the suggestive conversations that are put out there. Like to say, like, it could be a news thing. They're trying to come at your social security. They're trying to take away who's trying to take away my social Why are you putting fear in me? Well, how do you start with a fear? Because you know that human nature is just for survival. And so I'm going to lean in like, who's trying to hurt me and not really focus on what's being said. And so it's really interesting how we do that too. And I think, and I said this on a friend's TikTok. He said I shouldn't say this, but most people don't realize it. But we're all the same. Even people that are trying to sell a T-shirt are going to try to make it look prettier than it is on their picture. Or if we all try to sell something, and we're not being genuine about something if it comes to trying to get other people to leverage it. We can't just be honest. We have to find the right lighting. I gotta have lighting so I don't look like I'm shadow because it might make me look seedy or something. So there's always this form of selling that goes on, but doesn't mean you cannot be aware of it. You just got to know, what do I need versus what do I being sold that I want. And so it's just a whole different game of thought process that I would say, unfortunately, I would say most people don't think about. And then when they do think about it, it's usually on the spiritual world, which separates the business. And so that's why I bring them both together and try to make it where it's not a spiritual thing. This is just a human thing. And we've compartmentalized spirituality and business, but they're both the same because I'm there in both situations. So I'm a spiritual being and I might be in business. So I need to have both at the same time. I don't need to go to church on Sunday and then be an ass on Monday. So I need to
Mm.
understand how to bring that all together in one piece without tagging it as Christianity, Muslims, or anything else. So, it just is. Human nature should be bettering ourselves because it's what we can do. We can choose to do so. And that's what I'm trying to get people to think about.
I
I was
find
rambling.
I find that it's so interesting when you look at whether it be religion or ancient religions or texts that they all kind of say the same thing.
Yeah.
I think one of them that you're hitting on is, like, go out, be alone, have silence, try to quiet your mind. I mean, Jesus went in the desert for 40 days. They say
Yeah.
he fasted. but also
Actually,
his
ironically, the word 40 days, like I study Greek and Hebrew, and I tell people this all the time. If you read the Bible from the natural language that it was written and in the time frame and who they were talking to, you always look at what they were talking to, what was the context and who they were talking to. It's a completely different Bible. It's 100% what you just said. In 40 days in the Bible, there's no word for sky in Hebrew. So,
mm,
and so when they say heavens, that means sky. So a lot of, and so when they say 40 days, that just means a period of time. It doesn't actually necessarily mean 40 days. It means for a period of time. It could have been 6 days. It could have been 20 days. But we put our own American context on the meaning because we by nature are egocentric. So everything is like, I think Sadhguru said it best. He goes, if a cow had the concept of believing a God, an ox, if an ox a way to believe that there was a God, God would look like an ox. You know,
mm,
because we put God in our image versus really understanding what God, the whole concept of being Christ-like is. The Christos is what you just said. It is that quietness, that ability to get out of your own noise
mhm,
and focus on what is versus what it appears to be, because this is just a ruse. This is a temporal ruse for an experience to say I get to choose. The only God conscious is humans. Every creature lives by instinct. We're the only ones that have a concept of choice. So
mhm,
that's the God consciousness, is I can choose to be on your podcast or I can choose not to be. I can choose to, just, go take this contract. I can choose to go to college and become a doctor or not. These are choices. I can choose to stay with my wife, to leave her. I can choose these things. When animals will just procreate and not have this look at their spouse and be like, "I'm sick of this bird." They don't
mhm,
do that. We do. We find problems and we make them bigger because of our ego. And that's what's interesting, is like how to be quiet and just not have the ego around. So that's why Joe Dispenza has a concept where he says, in space, meaning in nothingness, like be in nothing. So you don't have the concept of yourself in the process. And I think that's really a powerful way to look at it.
What are some strategies that you employ to kind of focus on that second person, the second voice in your head, just to listen to it, to observe it?
Well, I'm gonna be transparent. I'm a very emotional guy. I'm very sensitive. I'm very, I think for me, I always have a thing where I say the I. I always separate myself from the I, because any feeling I have is based off of some paradigm that brings that feeling to me.
Mhm,
If I see if I walk up to a car dealership, my frustration about having to deal with a car salesman is because of an experience I've had with a car salesman, right? So everything I feel that's negative, I have to figure out where that's coming from. It's not necessarily what is, it's just why am I feeling this? So I always put the I in front of my feelings. So why is the I? Because that I is the humanist feeling this, and that's just for me to separate myself from that emotion so I can look at it from a perspective of, I would say, Sweden. I don't have a certain bias to it, and it's not because of, it's just is. Okay, so I remember this happened, and I can see why the I is feeling this way. But
mhm,
what do I choose now? Do I want to go down that rabbit hole? Do I want to play that song, or do I want to take that song off the record and put on something else? And
mhm,
I sometimes, to be honest with you, sometimes, like, what, I want to play the song for a little while, but I know it's okay. I choose to let myself feel it and let it ride. And it's like, okay, the song will end soon, but just right now, I'm just feeling a little melancholy about this. And that's okay. I think the world, we act like you have to be always happy, but bad feelings are just as biblical. And no one in the Bible had a good day. If you ever read the stories, all of them had pretty messed up days.
God,
So
it was God's will.
right, right. So it's like, just having a bad day is not a bad thing. It's just it's a time to reflect and see these emotions. You embrace those emotions just like you embrace the bad one. I mean, the good ones. I think we have the sales pitch that you have to be in total bliss all the time, like a hippie, and hug a tree for you to be spiritual. Spirituality, you are spiritual. Everyone is, because you're human. Every human is spiritual, period, whether you like it or not. It
Mhm,
has nothing about being spiritual. It's about being aware of your spirituality and then taking the opportunity to embrace it in every level. And I think that's what people forget. There is no sales pitch here, and there's no way to make money in that way. But if I can say, do this so you can be happy, all of a sudden I'm selling a product. And
mhm,
that's where we get lost in. We get lost in our e-commerce way of looking at life. Yoga is a form of meditation, but now it's a fitness product program.
mhm,
So we've commercialized everything that should just be, and it really, you don't need to take a yoga session. You can just start sitting in quietness, and you don't even have to stretch. You can stretch your hamstring if you like to, but it's not necessary, but it's just
Mhm.
one of those things where we've lost the concept of what it means to be spiritual. It's become commercialized.
Well, I think the evolutionary biologists and psychologists would say that happiness is not necessarily a valuable function for, survival, you know? If you're just 5,000 years ago, you're just, "Oh gosh, it's so nice to be out here in the forest, it's so great." You're just lounging around, it's like, "Oop, there's a jaguar."
Yeah,
Like, oh, you
exactly.
need to be, like, on guard, you need to keep your situational awareness high,
I love that you
like,
said that. That's so
wh
true. No one's
where yeah, I mean, if you're very, very happy, like,
Mhm.
you're not gonna go out and be striving for the next thing. So, is that a feature or a bug? I guess you can think of that on your own, but that is a reality that you have to remember, like, "Hey, like, my mind is sort of programmed to be thinking about the next thing." Like
Yeah, well, we kind of create our own problems too because we look for. I mean, if you look at the problems we have today, it's like we have no real issue except for what we disapprove of. Disapproval is the biggest issue we have in life right now. So we disapprove of so many
mm,
different things. Disapproval is not an issue; it's a choice, and
do
I've never seen anybody cross a picket line and but saying, "Oh, you know what? You've convinced me." So there's no purpose to picket anything. It's just we are too comfortable, and so we find reasons to not be comfortable because our nature is to find a way to survive. And so if we're just surviving without a threat, we feel like we need to create our own threats. That's by nature because life is threatening. And
mhm,
the real threat is what's finding out what's really valuable. And I think we have a skewed sense of what's valuable anymore. And it's been evident just through the way the culture shifted, but it's not my place to make a statement about it. That's kind of where I struggle is like, I'm not that voice. I focus on the people, individuals, and maybe that individual is the one that's going to speak to the masses. I don't know, but that goes back to the entertainment stuff. I like being behind the curtain and just kind of like seeing who the star is and go, that person should be a star. That person should be seen. And I still have that part of me that I really appreciate that because some people I disagree should be stars, but they gave up their soul to do it.
mm,
And then there's some that could be stars, but they won't give up their soul to do it.
mm.
And I really admire those people.
Well, I think also as an American, just having a sense of perspective, you seem like a guy who's traveled a lot. I just got back from Mexico City and Pachuca,
Mhm.
which is a city north of, Mexico City, and they have so much less than us,
Yeah.
and that's not even like a third world country, like,
Yeah.
it was, like, pretty developed. I think we
Yeah.
have a sense that, like, oh, Me like, if you're an American who hasn't traveled, like, "Oh, Mexico, that's, like, that's a crazy country." That's, like, one of the top 20 GDP economies in the world. So,
Yeah.
if you wanna start thinking about, like, the low, low, low countries,
Yeah.
you can find those in Sub-Saharan Africa and places where
Yeah.
they have, like, nothing.
Or even the Philippines and Thailand. I mean, you see people that live like, and they're happy as crap, and they
Yep.
have nothing. And
Yeah.
it's funny you say that. I was just talking to my kids, and I said, I wish you guys would just take an opportunity to travel. I would just travel the world, work as a waiter somewhere. I don't care. Just get out and get out of your own skin and realize what you see as negative. It's like you'll have a different perspective. You'll come back with such an appreciation. And I think that, part of them are afraid. And I'm like, that's why you should do it. Like, especially
Yeah.
them, it's like, do it, just go, just have fun. And I say have fun, meaning don't go out there and abuse, but go out there and just observe, just become an observer of nature, learn different cultures. And I remember my first experience with the Indian culture. I dated, true story, I dated this girl. She was Indian, Eastern Indian. And I rode up on her to her house with her on the back of my motorcycle. Her dad,
Mm.
they first generation to the U.S. Her dad, he looked and he was like, and he walked up to me with a heavy accent and he's like, "I'll give you $10,000. You leave my daughter alone right now."
$10,000? I
No,
don't know. I
I
mean,
should have taken it. I should have taken it because
yeah.
it's like we weren't together. But it was funny. But the mom was really sweet. But I remember she brought me over to dinner. Before that time, I was 18. Before that time, I had never sat and had dinner for an
Mm.
hour. We sat for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours talking about religion, about life, and I was like, "What are you guys doing?" I used to eat, just shove it down and run, right? I never sat down and had dinner. So I was like, "Well, is this what you guys do every night?" She's like, "Yes, we do this. This is what we do. This is our culture. We talk religion, we talk our life, we talk about our dreams."
Mhm.
And I was like, "Whoa, you guys are weird," but that
Yeah.
was my first, like, opportunity to see that there's a bigger world out there than what I saw, right? And I, I mean, I'm glad I didn't marry her. It was dysfunctional, but I heard the mother was really sweet. She taught me, the Indian foods and how to make them, and how just why they thought the way they thought. It was really interesting. The dad hated me, the mother embraced me, and it was just, but it gave me a first glimpse of there's more to life than what I knew.
Yeah, as the relationship was going more and more rocky, you should have been like, "All right, dad, I'm taking you up on that."
I should have. You're right. I should have had you around then. Where were you?
Yeah, yeah. Probably either very young or maybe not born if you were saying you were
I don't think you were
18.
born.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you were born.
So, all right, so you are selling life insurance. It's starting to actually work. It sounds like you're starting to appreciate it more for what it is. Maybe it's not your calling or your
Yeah,
passion, right?
right.
But you're starting to not at least hate it. It sounded like for periods of time you just hated it.
Yeah.
You're meeting some good people. You're starting to figure things out. Raytheon comes along. I don't know if that's a big part of the story or just more like a
No, that was
buzzy company,
that was
but
a big part.
take us through the next part of the story.
Yeah, so I mean that was a big part. Raytheon came, and I did Raytheon, and then Raytheon happened, and there was a emergency in the U.S. where I had to, we couldn't fly, couldn't do anything, and then again because I was selling insurance to companies, my focus was individual. I wanted to work. I figured big money versus if I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do it worth a while. If I'm a, and so I just started focusing on companies. And so one of the companies I was working
Mm,
with was a recruiting company, and I was kind of sharing how this is not my calling. Like you said, I wasn't really feeling like I want to do this all the time, but I was befriending a lot of people and business people, and so I became a recruiter. One of the guys that ran Robert Half said, "Why don't you work here? You're a great salesman. Why don't you teach my people sales and run a team?" And again, I haven't had recruiting background. Again, I never had recruiting, but I said, "Okay, I'll give it a shot." And I still kept my license. I still worked for the MetLife, but you didn't have to be in the office, so I can kind of do both. So I
yeah.
did that for a while and found out that I did like it, but I didn't like it. I couldn't find my niche. And I think part of going back to just reflecting, I was still comparing it to the fitness industry because I was the most free in fitness. I had maybe, I think it was like 38 gyms in California where I actually taught other people to teach for me, and I had worked contracts out with health clubs all over California. And so I ended up training people. They paid me $500. I taught them how to teach what I taught, and what I taught was
Uh,
different than everybody else. I taught it completely different. I had my own bags, my own gear. I sold my own T-shirts. I sold wraps so people can wrap their hands, and sold them gloves. And I worked a contract out with health club to hang the bags and then have the classes set up. I couldn't do all the classes, but then I would get my best students and say, "Hey, you want to teach on the side? I know you have a full time
mm,
job, but you can do this at night and the weekends." And a lot of them said yes. So I had all these people working for me. So I was making some really good money, and I was still teaching and had my own click, if you will. We would all meet for dinner certain nights and stuff. So that I think I was comparing what I had to what I was building, and I was
mm.
always dissatisfied with the jobs all the time, even though I had a good thing going. So I did the recruiting thing for a while, and then that's when, as I was recruiting, working with Robert Half, that's when Raytheon came around because I was teaching, and that's what happens when I started creating seminars for companies that used us for recruiting. So if I found a company that wanted to hire two people, account managers or whatever in accounting, or auditors or whatever, say, "Hey, you have a sales team. I can come in and teach your sales team about," and I would use the Jim Rohn stuff because people knew that I knew Jim Rohn. And that got me speaking at these, and I was doing little sermonettes, if you will, at these companies at their sales rallies or sales meetings and stuff. And then that's when this guy Raytheon picked me up. And so when I did Raytheon,
And
that
what were you doing for Raytheon? Similar stuff?
dude, that was that was crazy. I don't know how it happened, but I had to sign a lot of NDAs. I had to sign a lot of stuff. I had to work with Raytheon. They had purchased Hughes Aircraft, and Hughes Aircraft and Raytheon merged, and I had to work with their engineers on how to get along because they did not get along. There was this tug of war of power. It was like Game of Thrones kind of thing taking over, and
Mm,
so I was there to help solidify how to work together. Now, I wasn't really skilled in it, I don't think at the time, but this guy saw something in me, and I went through. I developed a program that out of my ass. To be honest with you, I didn't know what to do, but I knew that I could see the dysfunction, and I started developing a program, kind of using Steve Jobs' program, how he built Apple, and
mm.
started focusing on the whole logic behind equality of like circle conversation. I had engineers getting on the floor, sitting on with no shoes, talking about how they feel and teaching people how to talk and not get emotional. We talked about the mind. I was always in the mind. I was always in the mind before it became popular. I was completely in the mind. Jim Rohn put me in that stuff, mind science, way beyond before it became like mainstream. And so I worked with them with that, but at the same time, they contracted me out. My first contract was GE Home Finance. And that was my first mortgage company that I worked for. And they hired GE started their own mortgage division, and they hired the guy that ran a credit card division to run the mortgage division.
Mm.
And it was evident he didn't know what the hell he was doing. He had no clue. I mean, he looked at me. I remember one meeting, he goes, Julian, what's a basis point? I keep hearing people say basis point. What is that?
Coming from credit cards, not knowing BPs, I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, but there's a lot of companies do that. You might be, and especially in call center kind of corporations, they don't really run the business. The managers run the people, and the
Yeah.
business runs itself because of the business itself. The flag they have is so large, and they have so much marketing that they already have. The business runs itself. It's like a ship that's on waves. It just pushes forward, and they
Mhm.
just got to make sure their little pocket in that ship is taken care of,
Yeah.
and that's what he was doing. So and I developed training for them. And to be honest with you, I didn't know a lot about mortgage per se. I was learning as I go. I'm good at developing training for myself because I have a learning disability, which people don't know. But going back to the motorcycles, I was hit on the freeway and going 50 miles an hour. And my that one day I had a spiritual voice, a voice like your voice right now talking to me, and it said, "Put your helmet on, put your jacket."
Mm.
And I was like, I don't need to put my helmet on. I'm a pretty boy. I got to have my hair flowing, man. What you talking about?" And it was like an argument with something. And you didn't, and my brain didn't even consider that I was talking to nobody. It was almost like it was normal to talk to nobody as if it was there. And, and carrying a mouthpiece in my mouth, I always mumbled. And so, and then my head bounced so many times, concussion and stuff. They said if I didn't have a helmet, I would have been dead because my
Mm.
head hit the ground so much. And, but so I have a bad memory and all kind of weird things with that. But so I've learned to develop a certain style of learning and teaching myself. And so I developed a lot of training for them. And then another company took me on another company. And then I started doing a lot of mortgage. Mortgage was booming. It was before the crash, and it was booming. And I was working with so many mortgage companies developing sales training and leadership training. And that's when I became a little arrogant, and I told the sales guys at Wells Fargo, I said, I could probably outproduce you guys in 6 months. And
Mm.
they were like, what? So they're like, I challenge. This is before you had to get to NMLS number. You didn't have to have a license. You can just sell. And
You just went for it.
I just said, bring it. I'll do it. And dude, this is the funniest thing. I outproduced them in less than 3 months. And the
Mm.
top producer, and how did you do that? And I said, I wasn't a loan officer. I literally started reaching out to people I knew from LA that were moving. I was in Arizona at the time. And I said, I knew people because I already had been talking to people through, venues that we hated Arizona, but we liked it. I was talking about how it's reasonable price. And I knew some big people in LA through my associations. And so I had some that says, hey, I'm thinking about moving to buying some property in Arizona. So I just went to the top realtor and say, "Hey, I got a friend who wants to buy a $3 million home in Scottsdale. Is it okay if I introduce you to?" "Hey, how you doing? What's your
Yeah.
name?"
Yep.
So all of a sudden, I'm interacting with this top realtor, and I have them talk, even if they don't close the deal. But now I have a relationship,
Yeah.
right? And so I started getting deals through top producers. We're talking $1 million deals, and that was what I did. I sold, I think, 6 homes, about six, and out of their 15, and I was producing them because of the volume of the sale. So that was what I did. And so but I gave that business up, and ended up, the crash happened. That's when the mortgage crash happened.
Mm.
Well, not right before the mortgage crash. I was contracted with them. Another company, Mortgage Lenders Network, asked me to come on board and direct their sales. So I did, and literally within 6 months the crash happened.
Mm.
And then I knew somebody at USAA, and I took a job at USAA, and that's when I became an employee of a company. I worked there almost 10 years. I just worked. I was miserable, dude, always comparing my past fitness, but I worked there. And I just wrote it out there for a period of time while my kids were growing, and made sure they had like me coming home every day and stuff like that, because I traveled a lot with Raytheon. And that was my life for a while. And then they relocated us here to Dallas, and that's how I ended up in Dallas 10 years ago, 11 years ago. So
So what does life look like for you now? I know you got a variety of different things that you're doing.
yeah, I just consult now. I mean, I'm a low key. I'm a part of, there's different ways to market yourself. I get emails all the time trying to, we want to get more clients. I can get you this, get you that. I'm just been a part of mastermind groups. We meet 4 times a year someplace in the world or the country, and they're expensive mastermind groups, but these are top producers and business owners in their own right that don't market themselves from a Gen Z perspective, but have their own businesses per se that work well from. And so I just work with them at this point. And so I just consult and build business models around and sales development and leadership development, become top shelf products for them. So if people get hired on, they have to take this program. I tie an NLP into a lot of things. And to be honest with you, I've gotten past the point where people leverage it and actually use it, but they have to take the class anyway. So,
Mm,
and I do a lot of coaching. So I coach people, but I don't like promoting who I coach, but some of the people I coach are pretty well known, but I focus on
mm,
their traumas and childhood triggers, because a lot of people make it not knowing that, they were running from something, and then that thing never really goes away, and then they self-destruct. So my goal is to make sure they're aware of that as they're riding this high, and that not having that guilt of success that a lot of people have. Um, and so I work with them on that. Like one lady I just worked with, she just became the VP of a division that they started because of her
mm,
and what I coached her on. And I had her focus on one thing, and she did, and it became so big that they made a department for it and made her the VP of that department. And she's like, "Holy, I don't know how this happened." And so I'm like, "Okay, let's before you start sabotaging, let's make sure you don't freak out." And so I worked with her, and I still work with her. She's doing well. I'm still working with her on a couple of things, but those kind of things I like doing, going back to entertainment, being behind the scene, and like pushing people out. That's what I
mm,
like to do.
mhm.
But I do have some work on myself to do about that, because I need to get out there more. For what I've been told, Raquel, she's been bugging me. Raquel. I think she was on your show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, Raquel's awesome. I just saw her commenting on your LinkedIn post, like, but right before I got on the call here. Yeah, and
right.
one thing that I wanted to say earlier, but I'll jump in here with it, is what you just hit on is that people are always bringing things into conversations that were from way back in the past.
Hmm.
You might be trying to have a conversation with an employee, and they take, like, huge offense to it, and you're like, "Whoa," like, what I'm saying is not that big of a deal, like, it's okay.
Yeah.
We're not gonna fire you. So many of my employees, I have to, like, tell them, like, "We're not gonna fire you, like, we're not terminating you."
Yeah.
I had this one gal who every time we would have a meeting, she'd be like, I'm getting fired today, I know it." And I'm like, "No, you are not. Like, we
Wow.
love you. We want you to work here. What I
Yeah.
need you to do is not continue to ruminate on this idea that we're gonna terminate you,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's not productive for anybody."
It's not. But we
So
go back to perspective. Having perspective versus perception. It's a huge opportunity for people. For people who just keep that in their head, what you see is not what is. That's the bottom line. What you see is never what is. You have to stop seeing what you see and focus on what is. It sounds like it's a word game, but it really, if you say that to yourself enough times, you start looking at things differently. You start seeing for what it is. For instance, I go to a very exclusive gym, Cowboy Fitness. You got the football players there, you got cheerleaders, you got all these high end white collar people work out there. Um, there's a guy there, and I thought it was very interesting. I ran up to a lady was talking to a guy. My phone was on the floor. Her foot was near it, and
mm,
so I ran up and grabbed it and moved in. It kept going. And I remember there was a pass in the past. If I was her, my brain does this. If I was her and I saw somebody run and grab their phone and run away, in the past, I would have taken offense to that. You know what I mean? As a teenager, be like, "What? You think I'm gonna steal your phone?" But it had nothing to do with me. But a lot of people do that. They can put everything in context of themselves, and that is where the challenge lies, because we don't realize how big our egos are. We think everything revolves around our feelings, and
mhm,
our feelings aren't real. They're just these moments that just pop in based off of what you're already resonating with or what you're seeing. And so that's why I said change your perception will change your song. And that's why, I teach people change, because everything is just a ruse. It could be a bad thing or a good day. If your wife or spouse or partner doesn't get up and say hello when you walk in the door, it could mean she doesn't care for you or he doesn't care for you, or it could mean they're busy or they didn't hear you. It could be so many things, but you can walk in mad because they didn't, right? So it's just one of those weird things.
Talk to me about NLP. What is NLP? I see you talk about that a ton. You're not the first person who's come on here and kinda put that out there.
Yeah.
A little bit about it, but give us like a rundown of what it is, what it isn't, and where you actually utilize that.
Well, I always worry about how I say this because NLP is not that's commercialized. It really is
Mm,
what I just said. There's no such thing as neurolinguistic programming. There's just synapses in our brains that produce certain chemicals that create a certain feeling that gives us a certain perception.
okay.
That's it. It's been since the beginning of our species. That's all there is. So NLP is really understanding that concept. Now you can do it from the words, from tones, from visuals, from touch. All different senses that we have a form of NLP to them. So a good example is, I was a fighter, so I was teaching my. You might have heard it on maybe a podcast or something, but teaching my son to box at 7, and I hit him in the nose
Mm,
accidentally. I didn't want my wife Sandy to hear about it, so I stopped before he let his brain associate getting hit in the nose by his father at 7, what that meant to him, which means I'm going to cry, I'm going to be hurt,
mhm.
I'm going to run to mommy. So what I said was, "Dude, Jordan, you just took a punch from me. Look at my size compared to yours.
Ah,
You must be a superhero. I knew you had mutant powers when you were born. I knew you had some powers that separated you. There's no way a person your size could take a punch like that."
mm,
And his synapses, now the chemicals in that synapses were different than the ones from I just got hit by my father. And then he said, "Well, hit me again." He was actually looking to get hit. He's like, "Do it
mm.
again. This is great."
Because you complimented him on, like, how tough he is, essentially.
Right. I gave him a certain different chemical. I call it. My mother's from Louisiana, so I call it chemical gumbo. I added to certain seasoning in that gumbo to make it taste like that. So and that's what NLP is. So you can talk to people. You can say, "Hey, I need you to come in our office," which means to your employee, "Come to your office." I remember when I was in high school, they said go to the principal's office. I was in trouble,
Yes.
so I associate trouble with come to my office. So it's understanding that the words we use impact the person's chemical soup in their brain, and that gives them the perception and how they're going to behave in that process. So learning how to talk to people or learning what those synapses are, you have to be able to observe them prior. You have to know who they are. So you have to ask, you have to watch. You got to see when you say something, do they do like, maybe not that extreme, but if you say, "I need to talk to you," like all of a sudden, like, "Okay, I'll be there shortly." And you see these things, you're like, "Okay, there's something here with the word, I need to see you." So you
Mm.
learn how to observe people's behaviors. And so that's kind of like the street level without getting into the wanting you to think I'm smart level, and just use all the big terms. But that's the street way of saying what it is.
Yeah, someone on this podcast actually, I was talking about something similar, and they said, "Well, why don't you just not do these reviews in the conference room?" Like, I think people are taking the conference room to mean like bad situation. We don't
Yeah.
use my office is really small.
Yeah.
I can almost stretch my hands out side to side, so it's like too tight to do like a one-on-one or a
Right. Right.
two-on-one kind of thing. But we go to the conference room, and she
Yeah.
goes, "I think people are associating the conference room with bad stuff, Alex. Like maybe you should do these reviews somewhere else." I was like,
Well, yeah,
"Oh,
I don't
interesting."
that's an easy way out. I believe it could be possible, but I think the best way to do it is you have to, everybody has an anchor. We in NLP, there's a thing called anchoring, right? So everybody has an anchor. So what I just used with you is like, I need you to come to my office or come to the conference room. So, association is there's an anchor to that. What's the
Mhm,
association to that? Come to the room. Like I said, maybe going to the principal's office. I'm in trouble.
mhm,
So instead of talking about review or something, you need to change the anchor. So my thing is change the script. It's better to say, "Hey, I want to talk to you, but first, how are you doing today?" And
mm,
and then before I say how you doing, let me tell you what's going on with me because what people do and leaders forget this all the time. Leaders think they're being leaders by asking people how they're doing, but never really sharing how they're doing. Because
mm,
leaders always want to make sure that they look like they're on top of their game.
yeah,
And because of that, your employee wants to make sure they are on top of their game. Because if not, then I'm a weak vessel to you. And I don't want you to see me as weak. And that's the problem with leadership is that people mirror what they feel. So the best way to get people to be open is to first be open yourself and to be vulnerable. I'm really struggling, damn it. I've been tired. I'm struggling learning how to do this one thing. I know I know SAS, I know this, but I'm really struggling with this one thing in the system, and it's really just driving me crazy. And then, but that's me. But what's going on with you? And if they don't say anything, be like, if they do say something, forget about what I want to talk about. I want to get more into that and make sure you're okay. And if you can do that one day, what you do is you shift the anchoring. All of a sudden, that's not the anchor anymore. Coming to see you is a different environment. It's a different perspective than it was what I perceived it to be. And I tell people that it's a big shift if you can just do that one time. In my sessions, I have a seminar, and I'm doing it again in August in Wyoming for 2,000 teachers, and it's going to be a crazy because I've done it before, and I did it once, and I wish this before recordings were really popular, and I didn't record it, but man, it was so popular. It
Mm,
was so powerful. I had every person there. We had cell phones then. Every person there to text one of their employees, and there wasn't 2,000 people. It was like 400, and I said, I want you to just say, hey, I was just thinking about everything you do, and I nothing, and I have no agenda here. I just want to say thank you. I know you have, and then fill in the blank. I know you have your mom staying with you right now, and your dad's in hospital. Your kids are going through some troubles at school, but I just want to thank you for just always being so dedicated to helping the business thrive, or something like that. I said, put in your own words, but do something like that. And I'm going to talk, and I say before we get to the next thing I'm going to talk about, I want you to right now, after you do it, put your phones off of vibrate, and I want to hear the chimes. Dude, it felt like Christmas. So like ching, 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 ching. And all
mm,
these people are saying, thank you so much. You have me in tears. And I had people stand up and say, you have me in tears. Oh, it meant so much to me. That meant the world to me. I didn't ever expect that from you. And it's because we never do that.
mhm,
Now you just change the anchor. And you know what? That employee is more dedicated to you than ever. And that's what people forget is as we don't need to be leaders anymore. We just need to be human. And so
mm,
you're not even a business owner. You're just a person that has a business. There's a difference, right? And if you get people to see you that way, not my boss, then I'm willing to help you because there's no threat if I don't. And that means I'm gonna help you better because I'm not threatened. And that's just an oxymoron, but that's the true matter. People help people when they feel like there's no threat in themselves to do so. And that's what you want your employees to feel like. And that's what Gen Z companies are doing better than legacy companies. Legacy companies are like, I'm the boss.
mm.
Gen Z companies are more, hey, we're equal. I'm trying this idea. What do you think? You got any ideas you want to share with it that might help grow our business? There's a whole different game. And I think that's what I've been preaching to legacy companies. And they're getting mad at me about it a little bit, but I'm the crazy person. But eventually they'll look back and be like, he was right.
Well, I tell people this all the time. As a leader, you only have so much leadership capital,
Yeah.
and if I use it in the way of, say, "Julian, just do it. I told you to do it, and you have to do it. Why? Because 'Cause I'm the boss."
Yeah.
Like, you get to say that, like, maybe once, like, maybe twice before Julian goes, like, "Forget this guy." Like,
Yeah.
this is either illogical or it's not the best way or he didn't take my input or feedback or just like screw this guy. Like I don't care what you're telling me to do if that's the way you're going to tell me to do.
And the worst part about that is you might not even know that. They'll just work at maybe 20% or 30% and hide the other 60% and 70% and make it look like something. So even your data is skewed because half the data is built to hide what I'm not doing. And
Mm,
so it just ruins your business in so many ways, but it's a slow bleed out. It's just another paper cut that just is creating a bigger bleed. And it's easy to change. I have a company I worked with, a doctor's office, and his in front desk person has been with him for 10 years.
mm,
Think about how she answers, how she approaches, how she treats people when they walk in after 10 years. It's like, "Hey, how you doing? Yeah, I've been here 10 years." That's her mindset. He has a new person that's in the back putting things, filing things, and how you doing? I'm like, she needs to be in front. And
mm,
he's like, no, she'll get mad if I put her in the back. I'm like, talk to her, ask her, "Hey, would you want to like take a break from seeing other people?" She was like, "Oh my God, yes." And he
mm.
thought, well, because that's her role, but he asked her and he put her in the back so she wouldn't have to be there, and she had her own desk in the back where she can just make sure the files are done. He put the happy-go-lucky, love people person in the front. He's like, dude, it changed everything. People were so happy. They want to come back. It's like it's these little things. We just need to know people and not just know our business. And that's where I'm trying to get people to think about.
This is something that I also echo to everyone who's like in a step up of leadership is it really is kind of the way that you sell it to that
Yeah.
person, right?
Yeah.
If that doctor would have said like, "Hey, we're demoting you and putting you in the back," that person's gonna be like, "Oh, like I did bad. I stink. Like they think this other person's better than me.
Yeah.
They haven't performed. Maybe they used to like what I do, but now 10 years later they don't."
Yep.
You can totally sell that as like, "Hey, we're gonna change things up for you because you've been kicking butt up front and
Yeah.
you're more organized than Sandy.
Mhm.
So we're gonna try to let like Sandy do some of the stuff up front. You're more organized. Like
Yeah.
you're great at this. I think you're gonna excel at this."
Mhm.
And I talk about this a lot when it comes from, like, leadership direction.
Yeah.
Kinda have to bring a unified front, and what I see really often is people, like, throughout the chain of leadership, they'll somewhere along the line, you'll hit, like, a chink, and they'll be like, "Well, the boss wants us to do this, but, like, I don't really think so." Like, I
Yeah.
they want you to go in the back. I don't agree with that. Like,
Yeah. That's
I think you should be doing something different. It just totally undermines, like, the people above you, and I always tell them, I'm like, "Look, you don't have to agree with everything I say,
mhm.
but please don't do it so publicly because you don't realize you have power in your words."
Yeah.
If you say, like, "Alex wants us to do this, I don't really agree with it." Now the person below them is like, I don't know who to believe. Like,
Yeah.
my indirect supervisor did one thing, they think Alex is wrong, and
Yeah.
it creates chaos, and they don't even realize they have so much power above their employees because I think they don't quite grasp, like, "Hey, I'm a manager."
What goes back to what I said. They're mirroring. If the manager does that, what do you think the employee does that? Now everything is about I have to because that's what Alex thinks. So it's just to your point, and it goes back to that understanding of your power of how you communicate, and people always mirror the temperament of that communication. So 100% agree with you. I don't like when people do that because we said so or you have to's. Even now, people coming back to work, ask people who wants to come back to work first. It's like you might have enough people show up, but you don't have to make everybody show up to work.
Mm,
So the goal is really to give people want to feel like they have some autonomy, they have some feeling of power of themselves. They don't want to feel like they're a slave to anything, even though people work for us. They didn't graduate school saying one day I want to work for Alex, right? That's everybody wants to have what you have or greater. They just don't know how to get there because of their own self-talk, and I think that's really the problem is that there's a person you probably know her, Susie Lindblom. I don't know if you saw that podcast I did with her. It wasn't a podcast. It was a recording on a Zoom call,
mm,
and I captured. It was 2 hours long, and I just captured maybe 13 minutes of it and put it on a little video. And I took some parts out because it was pretty. I got a little. Um, let's say I got a little. Energetic. So,
mm,
because she was like, "People wanna work for you." And I said, "No, they don't, Susie." I said, "They don't wanna work for you. They're working for themselves. Their survival. They have a paycheck. That's why they're there."
mhm,
90%, 95% of people in the mortgage industry never decided to wanna be in the mortgage industry. They fell into it, and they're stuck in it because of that situation. And if you keep thinking they're working for you, then really you're saying, "I'm the reason you're here." And that's already a disconnect right there. So the goal is to know that everybody wanted to be something greater. I wanted to be a dancer. I was the singer on my sixth grade talent show, and I got all this attention. I want attention. I want to be recognized. I want to be respected. I want to feel these things. That's what it is. The job is just a form that so I can have a roof and not have to be on the street. If we can just make that feeling come alive somewhere within the business, then you have a better employee and you have a better opportunity.
interesting. Julian, why do you think that we are so bad at having hard conversations? This is something that I bring up a lot on this podcast because I just notice it so much. People
Mm,
are really, really not only hesitant, so they just don't do it. Like, your employee's doing something wrong and you just, like, go in the background, and one of my favorite is, "I shouldn't have to tell Julian, he should just know." That's one of my like, you have to tell them, and I'm sorry if it's like, my chest gets a little tight when I have
yeah.
conversation because 'cause I'm telling Julian he's spending 30 minutes in the bathroom. It's like, "Dude, like, I don't know if you have, like, gastrointestinal issues, like, you just gotta get out there." He's gonna be so mad when I say it. He's gonna fight me, so I
Mm.
shouldn't have to tell him that he shouldn't spend 30 minutes in the bathroom. Why do you think we're so bad at having those hard conversations?
Going back to what I said before, we're living off perception. I shouldn't
Mm,
have to tell them. That's a perception.
mhm,
If you knew the person was in there depressed because their dog just died, or their parent just died, or somebody they love just broke up with them, or they just found out had an ailment of disease or something, you would have a different perspective about that person being in the bathroom for an hour
mhm,
or a long time. So it really is about going back to what I said earlier. We don't know how to communicate. We just know how to express. There's a difference. I can express what I feel and package it as communication. So I'll use an analogy from a couple that I'm coaching right now. It's so it's a jewel. So the female spouse says, "I want you to talk to me." and the person says, well, I feel this. And the spouse says, well, now I'm getting a pain in my chest and I'm really, really struggling with what you said. The spouse, did that person hear this other person or did they react to it? See, that wasn't communication. Hearing it is being like, wow, okay, you got something going on here. Let's dig into that. Like, tell me more. That's as simple as it is. Like nail on the head. I have a video. I don't know if you've ever seen. It's hilarious about a woman wanting to talk, and she goes, "I have this pain in my head. It's just this pressure." And you don't see her. You see half her face, and then she turns, and there's a nail right here.
Mm,
And the guy goes, "But there's a nail." It's always not about the nail. She goes, "You always have an answer. It's just, I just want to talk. Just listen." And he's like,
mm,
"Okay." She's like, "It's just this pressure in my," and she's like confused, like my sweaters are getting snagged. I don't know. And he's like, "Okay." Yeah. And I think going back to asking questions without any perceived concept of what that person is the only way to really communicate. And it's hard to do because our perceptions lie to us all the time. And you just got to learn to be able to be curious. There's an old saying like Curious George, just kind of be curious, like Curious George, just
mm,
open yourself up to just want to know versus assuming you know. And I think that changes your tone too. When you have that kind of curiosity, you do not talk or ask things in a way that's accusatory. We
mm.
we like if I said to you right now, ho ho ho, you might associate that with an old commercial called Green Giant, which is a peas commercial. If I say ho ho ho, then you associate it with Santa Claus.
I was thinking Santa, yeah.
Yeah, but there's 2 different ho ho hos. Each one means something different based off tone. And so the way you say it is based off how you feel about the person. You cannot fake authenticity. So if you're agitated by somebody and you're saying, I'm a manager and I want to talk to you about something I'm concerned about, but I'm actually agitated, they pick up that agitation and they're going to mirror that with protecting themselves with more agitation. And,
Mhm,
so- and it's just, it's a hard thing to teach without actually being in the mix of it. That's why as an executive coach, I get their stories. True story. I was with a company just recently. They had me come in because one of their employees was being accused of discrimination. African American man was talking about, he complained he was going to take it. It could go. This is a big company too. This guy. They were worried. So like, hey, we need to have some. We're putting this person through diversity training stuff. We want to take an extra step. Have you come in, coach, and be his coach for 6 weeks and give us an assessment. I did that. 3 weeks in, he looks at his phone. Is a picture of his ex-wife with her new boyfriend and their kid at Disneyland.
mm,
I saw his body language shift. I literally saw him go like, and I think what's going on? I saw, no, just a picture of my ex-wife and my daughter. And I'm like, oh, can I see? And when I saw it, I saw the African American man with his ex-wife and his daughter. And I'm like, do you realize that the gentleman that's in the picture with your ex looks very similar to the man who is on your team that is upset saying that you're discriminating against him. How do you feel about that? He's like, oh, I never thought of that. I said,
mm,
so when I brought this to his attention, I said, do you think maybe when you see him, you think of so and so? He's like, absolutely, I always do. Okay, he picks that up. So when he walks in, compared to everybody else, where's your facial expressions go? He goes, I can't look at him. Like, so do you see the difference here? So I said, and once he understood how his body language shifted, he explained to him, he showed the picture. He's like, dude, I really apologize. I am so unaware that my body language is giving that gestures off. Do you forgive me? And now they're best friends. And
mm,
but it's just being aware that people can see what you think you hide. It's never hidden. It's never hidden. But we're not in tune with it. We just react to it. Does that make sense? So most people are in tune to what they see. They just react to what they feel. And then they just compound interest on that same feeling.
mm. So as a manager, let's say you have a situation where you need to try to correct someone's behavior. How would you kind of go about that? Maybe not even correct their behavior, just like let's say like, you're my employee, Julian, and you do a really good job with a lot of things, but when I hear emails, there's a lot of like grammatical errors or
Mhm.
like a lot of like looks like you just sent it really quick. That's like one of my pet peeves. It's like fired this email real fast, which if it's like internal, no big deal.
Right.
But when we deal with our clients, sometimes they're multi-million dollar clients. So I'm
Yeah.
like, "You need to give multi-million dollar level service," right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So how would you go about, like, issuing that feedback without having someone tense up? because I know one of the things that you can talk about and you can expand on this is when you start to give people feedback, you say, "Hey, Julian, you're doing a great job, but" you get the "but."
The butt monkey.
Here we go. But, your emails, they're really kinda short and quick,
Mhm.
and, I think we need to work on that. Use
Yeah.
to go, "Alright, I'm in fight or flight mode," and I do have some employees that as soon as you start to give them feedback, they just, they're in a fight, they start returning fire. They're like, "Yeah, well, you do this," and it's just like, "Whoa," like, "Hold on a minute."
Well, it's interesting. I was going to ask you. There's a part of me that says you can't change people. All you can do is get them to be aware of what they can change. So the bottom line there is
Can you
like
say that
what
again? You can't change people, you can only be
make them aware of what they can change.
mm,
So the goal is to really separate what's changeable and what's not. Like where do you have control in? I mean, how like first of all, get them to agree. Do you agree that you've had good emails and some that are not so good emails? Do you agree to that? Yeah.
mm.
Which
I
ones do
think
you
I
think?
think what you just said there is really important. Sorry, I don't interrupt, but at least getting some buy-in from them.
Right. You have to get a dialogue, not where you're talking, but a dialogue. Yeah. Okay. So which ones do you think were the best, and which ones do you think you could have improvement? Let's look at those. Which ones do you think are the best, and are you willing to say there's opportunities to work on these? So what ways could you work on opportunities? Can work on these. I want you to be comfortable in how you approach it. Everyone has a different learning style, so I'm not going to say you should do it this way. I want to know what do you think, if you're willing. And again, if you're willing, if you're open to it, what do you think are some ways that you can work on this? And let them give you some parameters. And great, let's go with that, right? And then perfect. Now you've coached them, but they are in control of their own dialogue, and they're able to say, "This is what I'm going to do." Great, and then see. I would love to see that happen. I appreciate you coming up with those ideas. That's really what coaching should be. The way we've done it is the way we sold it. Like I said before in the beginning of this conversation, we've become snake oil salesmen in so many ways to say this is what you do. And there's no broad brush to anybody. There is no such thing as a broad brush. There's always individuals and there's always the ego that's first in front.
Mm,
So that's why you want to focus on how to get them to decide what to do. Now, another way to do that is write down what ways are out there that helps people learn how to become better at dot dot dot, fill in the blank, writing emails or whatever, and then write them out. Which one of those do you like that you think you can lean into? And then well, this one, okay, let's do that, right? And then give them a timeline. Do you think you can give me some ideas of what you've done in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Only because I want to be able to say, hey, I've seen him really do this because I really like, like having you around, have you being a part of the email list or sending emails to clients. So and you got to realize that, going back to knowing their story. If you could say, "Hey, so talk to me about your emails." If you recognize you've had some good emails and some not so good, right? And kind of chuckle at it, like not so good happens. I had some too, and I always carry it with a story. This is a true story, and I would carry it with a story. You can even use my story if you want. You can say, "I know a guy who's an executive who wrote a script for a CEO for a town hall." And I don't know if this is a clean show or not, but I'm gonna say it anyway.
you can curse. I've
Yeah.
already cursed a
Okay.
little.
I wrote this is a true story. I wrote a script for the CEO of the company, and he was doing a town hall. The whole company was shut down except for need to trunks that had to be open. The whole entire company was on the call, and he was on stage in the auditorium in the corporate office, and everybody else was on a internal Zoom call. And I wrote it, and he wanted me to write a part where one of the clients said something about one of the employees. Nice. He says, and I did. I pulled one of the surveys, and it said, I wanted to thank Chris for being such a great whatever it was. He wasn't very pushy. And I put, yeah, that word on there. And he read it. So I'm the guy they hired to write the script, and I typoed it. I spell checked it.
I thought you were gonna say he just misread it, but you were
No,
actually the
I no, I spell checked it, everything, and the spelling of the word was correct, but it wasn't the right word. Right? So
mhm.
I missed it. Now, that's a mistake. It happens. We all make mistakes. We all kind of mess up. It's okay. You got to laugh at it. You got to and those are just true stories. So I know that these things happen all the time, but I want us as a team to be open to being better at it. So I wanted to find out what works for you, and because I'm going to work on some of my things. Here's some things I want to see if you're willing to work on. And that's it. Instead of saying, yeah, I really need you to work on. Anytime you say something like that, it's always going to be pushback because
Mm,
I'm always going to compare what I do to somebody else if my ego is ever bruised. I'm always going to say, well, he or she or you, because it deflects from me, and my ego doesn't want to focus on me. So anything that looks like work is going to be painful to them.
So when you start to articulate the you, they're like, "Oh, I'm taking fire here."
Right. Yeah.
So,
Always.
2 quick questions, and then I wanna fill my ion bottle if it's alright with you. But
Yeah.
first is, what do you do if you have someone where they just are like, "No, no, that's not true. No, my emails are great." Like, they're great. Like, they just kind of refuse to accept it. I just had this happen.
Well, that's a
Maybe
good question. I mean, I would show them. I would say, "Well, let's look at them." If you and I always, you always got to stay composed. Like a fighter never shows, even in the corner, you never show your weakness, right? So,
Mhm,
you think, okay, let's take a look at them. Do you mind if we pull them up and just what so you can see what I'm looking at? Maybe we're talking about two different things. Is that okay? And be completely composed with that. It's like I'm not saying they're wrong or bad. And I always kind of re-emphasize what's being said to the subconscious. I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm saying it's wrong. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm saying can they be improved? That's all I'm looking at. So we're
can they
thinking,
be improved?
right.
I like
That's all you want to get to, because again, you're trying to re-anchor that feeling. You're trying to create a new anchor. So the goal is to do that. Now, and depending on the age bracket too, I mean, reading and writing, it hasn't been taught like it used to be, right? So if they're not a reader, they're not probably a good writer, right? And so you got to understand that too. So have some dialogue in yourself and know where this person's coming from. They might be dyslexic. There could
mm,
be so many different things that they're hiding from you that they're hiding from themselves. A lot of people are dyslexic, especially if they have ADHD, ADD. I mean, so if your brain is moving this fast, sometimes your reading or writing isn't catching up where your brain's at. So
mhm.
you have to kind of have that grace with that, right?
Ye
So,
and maybe that's sort of a bad example for this particular thing, because
mm,
with written text, it's like, hey, it's literally written on the paper. You did
yeah.
not put a period or a comma or whatever it is. There's a correct grammatical way to do it, and
Mm,
it's not what you did.
mm,
What happened to me a couple of weeks ago was, a young guy, he's a big, strong, tough guy, football player. He he will and has just made little comments that sort of, like, undermine our leadership, and he'll make them sometimes out loud.
mm,
This particular example, he said something along the lines of, like, I announced, like, "Hey, we're going to a company event on this day,"
mm,
and we're in a circle. We have probably 25 of our 34 employees in this circle, and he goes, "Oh, like, I guess I don't know how much work we're gonna get done on that day." Just like a little subtle comment, like a little jab, it's like kinda throwing it back to say, like, "Alex, that's a dumb decision as the business to, like, go to this corporate event instead of staying here and working. Not a
mm,
big deal if that was it, wouldn't be anything more, we would just move on." But he sorta does this on a recurring basis. So I had
yeah.
a conversation with him. I was like, "Hey, these little, like, jabs that you're kinda taking, especially publicly, like, they're really kinda undermining my leadership." And he goes, "I didn't do that. I didn't say that. That's not what happened."
So
And
let me ask you a question. If I can interject. Was he smirking or smiling at the time
I think it just
when he said it?
honestly, I love this guy. He's a great guy, great employee. I think he doesn't even realize that he's doing it. I think he,
Right.
like, totally sort of, like, not to say misunderstands his power,
Yeah.
doesn't realize that the comments that he make, everyone else is listening, right? And
Yeah.
when I make comments, people are gonna listen very wholeheartedly because I'm the business owner, and
Mhm,
he is in elevated position, so I think he maybe doesn't catch that, "Hey, I'm not just, like, with my buddies shooting the shit.
mhm.
I have a larger role in this business than maybe just a regular employee."
So do you think that the way you perceived him was, he's just undermining you, or did he saw it as he's just bantering or making like smug jokes? I'm like a
I
like
think that correct, yeah. The way I saw it, and then maybe 1 or 2 other employees, this is also usually something that when another employee comes up and they go, "Oh, this person did this again," then it's usually like, "Hey, like, I'm not alone in my thoughts on this." I
mm,
think that he just doesn't even catch himself doing that. He thinks that, like, I'm just kinda talking. So when I approached him, he's like,
mhm.
"No, I didn't say that. Even if I said that, that's not what I meant." Like, he's
Yeah, I
not
think and just so you know, when people say the last thing they say is really what they're trying to get across in NLP. So it's not what he meant. It's probably where he was at. What he was. It sounds to me like he was bantering, trying to be funny, almost like a sarcastic humor. Some people
yes,
have that. Like if
I
you
agree.
say we're going to make them like. somebody say we're gonna blow our numbers out the water. Yeah, we wish. That's a way of saying, okay, sure we are. I'm not trying to say we're not. I'm just trying to get a reaction so we can all laugh or get some attention, and because I'm used to that, especially if he's in sports or something. That's kind of like a negative banter is kind of a common theme in sports, especially in football and basketball, mostly football, if anything, and boxing. It's negative banter is kind of a duality of like positivity slash you suck. It's
But
like,
the
yeah,
reason I brought that particular example up was because he just, like, would not even admit that it was, like, a thing or a problem. He first it denied that, like, "I didn't even say that," and I'm like,
yeah,
"I know for a fact that you did say it."
yeah,
And then it's like, "Well, I just don't know why you're making this a big deal," like
mhm,
like, I agree with you that it's a great first step to, like, get the person to agree. Yeah, you're right, Alex, like, sometimes I just make these little offhand comments I shouldn't.
yeah,
He was having a tough time even admitting that he was wrong,
yeah,
and I say that to get into sort of the second part of my earlier question is how do you stop people from shelling up and getting into that fight or flight mode? Because I think that's where he was. He
yeah,
felt like, "I'm getting attacked right now, and
yeah,
I've gotta return fire or else I'm gonna be made to be the punching bag here." We're doing so many martial arts puns here.
yeah, yeah,
I'm gonna be the person who's, like, looked at as
yeah,
wrong in this situation unless I fight for myself, and
yeah.
I wanna, like, not put them in a position where they're fighting for their lives, they just are open, like, "Yes, I you're right, Alex, I'm not perfect." Alex isn't perfect either, so
I think the biggest thing is know the hill to die on here. Like, it's a battle. Is it a war? Is it a hill to win? A battle to win? So whenever you say you, just know that that's fighting words. It always is. You did is telling somebody their intentions, regardless of, even though you're focusing on an action, they're focusing on their intentions. I will always focus on my intentions. So, and but you will always focus on on the perception. So instead of saying you did this, say, hey, did I misread or did I misinterpret your comment? And you don't have to say the comment. If you say the comment, now you set yourself up to focus on what you perceive versus what they perceive. Don't even say what the comment is. But and they let them be like, what do you mean? Well, I took it kind of like you were little, almost like sarcastic about stuff, and I don't want to be wrong. So, what was the purpose of your comment? That's all you're trying to get. Oh, I was just trying to be funny. Oh, okay. Well, I okay. Well, that's your way of keeping humor. Okay, I can see. All right, no problem. Hey, but when we have these conversations, I'm just gonna, if you're gonna try to make it funny and I don't find it funny, I might call that a, here's so and so's bad joke. Are you okay with that? Because you're not going to change them. What you're going to do is you're going to have to kind of rope a dope it, right? Like Muhammad Ali used their strengths against them,
mm.
and kind of just make it okay. So I'm gonna do this. Hey, what's his name? What's the guy's name?
I don't wanna say it out loud, he's
Okay,
gonna
okay.
die.
Because but you easily say, all right. So you might say, this is what we're gonna do. Anything to add?
Mm,
Just kind of, okay, just make it like, just kind of make it a joke, because if you show that you're bothered about it, then that's going to always, people have always wondered what you're bothered about. So you never want to get bothered about it. You want to be curious about it. So and that you want them to relax, but it's always going to be a natural tension between boss and employee, always.
mm,
The challenge you're faced with is in a day and age where the way people are hired on now, they speak very freely, and you got to be very careful on what you say and don't say. You don't want to accuse people of something, because when you're accusing them of, yes you did, no I didn't, yes you did, that can becomes the problem, and it has nothing to do with the real issue. The real issue is you don't want to feel disrespected by a teammate, somebody that you have hired working for you. And the goal is understand that most likely no one's disrespecting you. It's what you interpret as being respectful. That's the issue. It's your interpretation. So you should really just let this person answer the question without telling them they said anything, and get them to see how that looks from their standpoint. Well, if it was flipped, how would you interpret that? If
mhm.
you were managing, or you were the head of the football team, and you said this, how would you interpret that? And that's why I wanted to make sure I was understanding where you were coming from. Again, I've said nothing about how I feel.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to understand how you feel, and that's the difference.
Julian, let's take, 2 minutes if that's cool with you.
I am okay with that.
Cool,
Oh,
thank
you
thank
came back. We were taking bets if you were going to come back or not.
Ah,
I'm
no,
kidding. I'm
s
kidding. Yeah,
sorry
but anyway,
to
that's
keep
fun.
I was gonna say, sorry to keep hammering you about that employee. I'm racking my brain trying to figure that guy out.
Well, I mean, you know, you I don't know how you feel about your employees when it comes to like longevities and who you pick and stuff, but it's really their responsibility to work on themselves. You just work on yourself. So to make your job happier and healthier is like don't rack your brain on any human nature. Just kind of make sure it doesn't impact you to the point where it becomes part of your demeanor and your body language and your focus when you're at work. Focus on doing what you're trying to accomplish and then see who grabs hold and wants to grow too. That's really it. Work hard on you. And if he's not the right fit, he's not the right fit, you know. And just if you have a certain culture you want to create of positivity and people lifting people up, then that becomes a conversation. I mean, his banter might be tear things down or look at it from a pessimistic view, but that's not we want to do that. And so if that becomes the vinegar in the water, then you know that just becomes what it is. And don't feel obligated to make that your responsibility. I say that a lot because you know managers' responsibility or business owners' responsibility is to be very clear on their message of what they're trying to achieve. Their mission and vision statement, I don't believe should be as written in stone. I think it should be a fluid, moving, living document. It should
I
because it's
agree
going to
with you.
fluctuate as you grow. And if you have something set in stone, one thing should be set in stone is kind of tribal mentality. Is like the tribe is the tribe for the purpose of the tribe being stronger. It's like you know, and it's just that's it's not because this tribe is as strong as its weakest link. What you're trying to say when you do that is you're trying to say who's the weakest link, and that creates a problem. So
Mhm.
so he's not about the weakest link. It's about being strong. That's it. Focus on what is a tribe for. The tribe is there to have each other's back. So we're back to back. We're full circle, being able to see outliers and make sure there's nothing that's going to break that tribe's mission. Now, what's the mission? It could be this year. It might change a little bit, but the tribe itself is always back to back, trusting that we can lean on each other, and that's really it. And so, having those kind of high level conversations to get that emotional trigger anchored in is really important to have. A lot of companies don't do that enough. They kind of have a mission statement, they print it out, it's on their website, but no one ever talks about it. You know, it's like
Mhm.
it's never investigated, looked at, or reviewed. And they say, we have this, we believe in our employees. The mortgage industry is infamous for this. And I call it I call it a spade a spade. When I have a leader saying, we're doing great, I'm so proud of my team, we broke our records. I'm like, all your employees except for your lowest producing salespeople have worked 60, 70 hours a week, not
Mm.
having a raise in 3 years, you know, not making as much money that they should based off of the economy. And you're proud of them. Where are they at mentally when you say that?
Mm.
Knowing that you have a mansion, you have a jet, that you have 3 cars, and your kids are in private school, you know, and they're like, oh no, they're happy to work for me. Like, really? So, and it's a hard shock, but it's like you can't say you're proud of them if you've never talked to them, if you've never been on the floor with them. I have a guy that I'm just kind of he's mad at me. He just can't call me. He just re-signed with me. He's like, I hate you, but I love you because you say things my dad never told me.
Mm.
But the bottom line is he's made his whole team company come back to the office. And I said, when was the last time you've been in the office? He goes, well, I travel and I work from home and I have my cabin up in Colorado. I'm like,
Mhm.
exactly. So, yeah, you're the owner. But when you say you have to do something, by nature, no one wants to do it, even if it makes sense for them. Even if it's the best thing for them, they're going to say, I don't want to do that. Or in their head, they're thinking, maybe I don't want to do that. But because they said, maybe I don't want to do it, they're looking for all the reasons why they shouldn't do it. And
Mm.
that means you're the enemy now. And you're relying on them to produce your production. And so when 5 o'clock comes, guess what? They clock out. If a customer's calling at 4:59, they're not going to answer. That's your brand now. So it's like that. It's just a simple thing to fix. It's really just understanding that how to be genuine and how to be real and authentic is not easy for legacy leaders.
Well, I've said this many times in this podcast. Whether you're a manager, a leader, a business owner starting to hire people, the two simplest things that you can avoid doing to create frustration would be lack of consistency, right? So just to your point, like
Mhm.
you have to come to the office, but
Yeah,
I don't have to come to well,
right.
why? Well, I'm the leader. I'm taking calls, every day. You're not taking the calls that I'm taking.
Mhm.
People are just going to be like, well, wait a minute. Like, I don't understand this sort of the rules for thee, but not for me.
Right.
People hate that. So just lack of consistency applying the rules.
Mhm.
Like if, Dave does something, but when Julian does it, well, Julian's one of our top producers. So it's okay.
Yeah.
People are going to get pissed off so fast. You
Yep.
just have to have that same level of consistency across the board. And it's hard. It can definitely be difficult to try to apply those rules evenly because you're like,
Yeah.
gosh, I really like this person.
Yeah.
But they are late all the time. So it's like, well,
Yeah.
what are we going to do? Are we going to fire them?
Mhm.
And then the second thing is just lack of transparency.
Yeah.
If you're not open with your expectations about people, if you're not thoughtful and forthcoming about things like compensation or what it looks like to be successful or how long you'll need to be at the company for you to get whatever paid days off or this, that, and the third. It's like, well, we'll let you know at some point in
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
People just hate that lack of transparency. And I know one of my friends works in entertainment, and he said it's like this big culture of not telling people like what's going on. And I don't know if
Yeah.
that was your experience, but I
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, dude, I don't know why they do that. That sounds like a cauldron brewing with animosity.
It is.
I don't want to do that in my
The
life.
reason they do that though is because they know I can get anybody. Everybody wants to work here. That goes back to what I was saying earlier. The legacy thinks people want to work for them, and they don't. And
Mm,
so you keep thinking you're going to get people to work for you, and you're not. You're going to get people, but it's going to be the lowest of the totem pole. It's going to be those who don't have any ambitions or just want to work for as much as they have to, and that means your red line or your performers are going to be actually low performers because they're just survivors. They're not really
mm.
thriving. And to your point, my son works in entertainment in Hollywood, in LA, and he works for a production company. And
You couldn't get him out of it, could you?
no, no, well, he just graduated engineering. Ironically, he's an intern, a paid intern. But the problem is, um, people by nature, most of us are just 80% of the culture is right brainers. We're creative by nature. We want to feel like we're able to have some part of us in experiencing life through our own creations. We did this. Any job we take that isn't part of that interest that we have, whether it be art, music, drawing, whatever it might be, we're feeling like we're losing a piece of ourselves every minute of the day.
Mm,
At the same time, I have to have a job because I need to make income. So then the income becomes my priority, and the time becomes my seniority when it comes to my that income. So then I feel like I'm losing a piece of me every day, and I can't get to that part of me that is me. So the goal is really to find what you can infuse. So like one of the companies I worked with, they did a pretty good thing, and a lot of Gen Z companies do this. They get timelines on roles. Like if you can get this done by Thursday, then take Friday, do what you want to do. I just want you to have this done by Thursday. If you get it done anytime between now and Thursday, take the rest of the week off. And they're finding that people do better if they can have that freedom, or they can say things, what do you want to do? What side hustle do you want to work on? You want to have a Shopify account? You want to have your own Pinterest? What you want to sell t-shirt? What is it you want to do? Because I don't want to act like you want to work for me. Just that's I know you have some part of you that wants to do something. You want to take piano lessons. What is it? They say, I just want to spend time with my family. Okay, great. Let's work on a way where we give you projects, and in those projects, there's a reward for you so you can be you. And that is not business jargon, but that is what's needed. We need to have real conversations. People want to find themselves and have more autonomy and freedom to do things. And you'll see people work harder for you with that. Like even my wife, she took a full-time job with the company I consulted with, and I told them, she's going to leave. She's now working W-2 for you, but you guys are putting a lot of work on her. But she wants to have her fitness business, and she does. She has a fitness business. And so they said, I said, this is what I would do. You want her to work for you, but let her have her fitness business with you and let her expand it on her own time. And they're like, okay. So now she does the fitness program with the company. And she's like, I like it better because I can express myself, which is fitness, with the company. Does that make sense?
mm-hmm.
So now she's a fitness guru for the company, and just fitness and nutritional supplement for the employees, and helps with them make diet choices and exercise throughout the day. And that's a side hustle for her. And they're paying her separately for that. And she can do it with other people as well. And she just runs a broker department for them. And so, but they're starting to wake up and go, okay, maybe we can be more loose with our rigid ways of thinking, and just start letting people find their passions and be okay with that. And you can't stop people from having side hustles. It's going to be the mainstream. Everyone's going to have a secondary side hustle to some extent, whether it be making $10 a month or 10,000 a month or more. everybody's going to have something where they're trying to make an extra buck somewhere because it's all digital. It's easy to get started.
Yeah, I have oftentimes encouraged people at our company to become more entrepreneurial. And it's a tough balance because you're like, I don't want this person to leave, but I want them to go out and try. I want to create
Yeah.
entrepreneurs in our company. I don't want people to be drones.
Uh,
And I'm sure what's true in the mortgage industry is that a lot of people will chase that financial incentive instead of
mhm.
actually thinking about what they want out of things. I
Yeah.
was thinking about good arts law. It
Yeah.
states that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So people
100%.
are just, oh, I just want to make more money, more money, more money, more money. It's like,
Yeah.
well, why? Like, what are you sure you need to make more money? You're making 400 grand a year. It's like, isn't that
Yeah.
good enough?
Well, they live to their means. As we credit has been one of the biggest viruses in our, in our industry. We put everything on credit, and then we live as if we're multi-billionaires when we really aren't. You know, and so with perception, we want to make people perceive our success versus be successful, and it's hard. I know a lot of loan officers that were struggling right now, and realtors. And most realtors don't sell a lot, but you know, some that were all of a sudden have this great cars and beautiful homes, and now they have to pay the electric bills, and the money's not coming in. And it's like, why live that way? I mean, who are you impressing? It's like Cat Williams said, when you buy your spinning rims, you can't see them spinning when you're driving. You know that, right?
Ah, that's good. That's good.
It's like you're doing it for strangers. It's like you're not even seeing them. You don't even know if they're really spinning.
Yeah.
so,
Well, I
so,
always like to think of hedonistic adaptation. You buy the Ferrari. Wow, this
yeah,
is amazing. This is my dream car.
yeah,
3 years from now, you're just like, it's just the
it's a car.
Ferrari,
Yeah,
man. Like,
yeah,
I know
yeah.
how everything works. I know, oh yeah, the seats are leather. It's like, dude, I only sit in leather seats now, so it doesn't
So
even. It's nothing for me.
my nephew is a really huge influencer on YouTube for Minecraft. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah, huge, huge. Has two McLarens and stuff, and he was saying the exact same
Jeez,
thing. He was like, "Yeah,
you're surrounded by famous people, aren't you,
it
Julian?
was, but yeah, but he won't call. He calls me, but anyway, it's just funny. It's just yeah, he's like, yeah, it's just a car. At first, to your point, he was like, oh man, I got it. It's like I was driving. He was like, yeah, it's just a car. He hardly ever drives them. He'll get in a station wagon now. It's like, it's just no big deal. I just need to get from A to B. But I understand.
Yeah, absolutely, Julian. Well, Julian, I appreciate you so much, man. Your insight's fantastic. The way you think about problems and people and relationships, you've really gone through the gambit of life, and I think your story is important, and I think what you're doing is important, brother.
I appreciate you, man. And thanks for having me. I know I canceled on you last minute the first time. I was totally bad timing. That's one thing I have to work on. I have to figure out how to grow the business or sustain it, or hire some people like you, or get some things done. I do everything on my own, so and again, I haven't marketed myself at all, so it's just been busy, 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 and just trying to get things on top of things. But I'll get there. So I appreciate you being patient with me, and I couldn't fly out there and stuff, but at least I get to meet you in 2D. You're much taller in person, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, I'm about 6 foot.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know
Yeah.
how much you weigh. We'll see if we're in the same weight class.
Yeah.
I'll meet you in here at some point. But
Yeah. It'd be
yeah,
fun.
man, I'd love to have you out. We're building a 63,000 square foot facility just down the
Oh wow,
road. We're gonna have a sweet, sweet gym. We're gonna have an awesome podcast studio in there. So
that's awesome. Are
when
you
it's
gonna
up,
rent it out too, or is this gonna be yours? Or are you gonna
it's
use
gonna
it
be
for?
ours. Yeah. So the building we're in right now, we'll lease out, but we'll move the whole operation over. So between our 3 buildings that we'll have almost 100,000 square feet of real estate. So
That's awesome, man. It's awesome.
it's
Yeah, I'd love to stay in touch with you and see if anything I can do to help you and be a part of that journey as you grow. But I think you're doing a great job. I think communication is a missing art. Even some of the podcasts that are out there, it's a missing art. It's just that we've had just banter and having all kind of conversations about different things. So anything you can do to get the word out about not having a perception but having perspective is really it's important. It changes everything.
I
So
I love it. Julian, we'll tag all your stuff, but where can people find you?
You can find me at pivottochange.com, juliansado.com, or LinkedIn, Julian Sado. And that's probably the easiest way. I'm old school, or that's basically the easiest way. And
Don't worry, man.
don't judge my
You don't need a TikTok or an Instagram and a
I
Twitter
have
and
them.
a Facebook.
I have them, but I don't use them enough. So I can't. I don't even want to put them out there because I don't use them. Like I said, I have to start looking to get more acclimated to the world. I know the world. I just don't do it. But I coach other people to do it. But I got to start doing it myself. I have so many people, probably people too, that have just been saying, "Dude, when are you going to do this consistently? You're not consistent." I'm like, I know, but I have people I'm working on that are consistent. I'm pushing their consistency without pushing my own. So I have to start doing it on my own. So I will. I'll get there.
It's tough, man. I don't enjoy that part of the business. I would love to be able to like go back 30 years and do it old school. And
Oh, it was so much easier. I tell you,
it,
it was easy. We have more technology now, but it was much easier then. I don't know how to say it that any better, but it's much easier to connect then. I'd even think it was easier to be famous then because your competition was picked for you. You know, it's like
mm,
you now anybody can be your competition, and they can do things that just get people to look at them, not actually have talent. You know, so it's
yes.
miscued of what's talent. Followers doesn't mean you're good. It just means you did something to make people say, "Oh, see if this happens again." You know?
Well, you can look at someone like the Catch Me Outside girl. She
Yeah.
became a rapper and was like getting like tons of plays.
Hmm.
So again, that eyes on the person has sort of morphed
Yeah.
to talent, like or interest. And
Right.
it's like, hey,
Right.
this person is interesting,
Yeah.
or they have interest in them. So now they get to be the talent where it
Right.
never used to be that way. You had to have the talent first, get the interest after. Now it's
Exactly.
the other way around.
Other way around. You can staple your tongue, and that could be on America's Got Talent now. It's like, oh, he
It,
stapled his tongue. It's like,
it'd probably get more views than this podcast, unfortunately. But hey, to each their own.
yeah, yeah. So no, I appreciate you. So yeah, I'll let's make it a bet. I'll be out there one day, and
Love to have you, man. Would love
we
to
can do
have
some
you.
sparring or some focus mitts on. And I don't like to get hit anymore, but I can throw some focus mitts on and go with you.
Absolutely,
Okay,
man. It'd be fun, Julian. All right, brother. I'm gonna let you get on with your Saturday, man. Thank you so much.
everybody, have a good one. Bye.
Appreciate you.